Hey y'all, how you doing today? So, I'm here to talk about what I consider a pretty important subject. And it's actually represented a huge pivot for me as a developer into really a leader and how that actually progressed. So, let's get into it. I'm here to tell you about the hard truth about soft skills and how it really is the secret to delivering excellence. I'm going to preface this a little bit. This talk is about primarily myself and is very much informed by my own experiences. And that means a couple of things. Yes, I will talk about my personal failures. Yes, I will talk about some of the failures of others. And yes, I will highlight some negative feedback that I've received recently or in the past. And yes, I will be bringing my perspective. No, I am not a licensed therapist. No, I am not a career coach. And finally, no, I will not use the real names of people or places involved, just out of professionalism and respect. So, considering all this, understand that I've also taken a lot of time researching everything from psychology and cognitive science to looking at articles, recent and going back hundreds of years, particularly on just the importance of soft skills and how that actually informs specifically for those in technical roles what they need to know. So I wanted to start with this particular quote, which is what employers are seeking most and not finding nearly as often as they'd like are workers who have what are known as non cognitive or soft skills, such as communication, critical thinking, team orientation, diligence, and integrity. In other words, the kind of human skills that make people successful at working with other people. And this was from something super recent. This was from an article in USA Today just at the end of May. We are right here at the beginning of June. We are talking about something that was approximately a week ago. That means that this really is something top of mind. And especially when we talk about things such as critical thinking in context with soft skills, we're talking about critical thinking not necessarily on just an individual level, but critical thinking in the context of others. So this is kind of the reason for this talk. A lot of us are really struggling around this because it isn't taught in school. And it isn't something that is really highlighted in a lot of the work or even the work requests of where we actually submit to. So I want you to take a little bit of thinking time here. Try to take a moment and identify yourself, particularly around things like the Myers-Briggs test, if you've ever taken any of those, or DISC tests, right? Like to tell you what kind of a person you are, especially in the context of groups. Just take a little moment to reflect on who you are and what you identify as. More importantly, do you know yourself? And even maybe different from who you were a couple of years ago, especially in the context of working with others. Where do you want to go? What is that next level or that next step for you? And more importantly, I want you to think about some of your favorite bosses, your favorite managers, and your favorite leads. Why were they good? What made them good? Or more importantly, what made them bad? Were they a shield for your team, you as an individual, from outside stress or things that have to get done? Did they help prioritize? Or did they really kind of pass that same stress that they were actually seeing or experiencing directly onto others? Did they take the time to care about each person, talk about their goals, and really invest in you individually? And largely, did they make you feel like you were heard, that you were participating? That's a lot of questions, only to get to like the end one, right? Which is, were they good because they were technically sound, or bad because they weren't as technically sound? And was that maybe just because you didn't know what was going on in their head? They would come down with a decision and you wouldn't know where it came from, what informed it, or who did they talk to? So here we come to the first section, which is hard truths. Can you handle it? This can be a little difficult. If you cannot be understood, your knowledge is meaningless. Genuinely, it's meaningless. If you can't share it, then you're the only person who has it, which means you're the only person who can do it. So let's go into that a little bit. You do not work by yourself, at least in most cases. Even if you claim that you are a single developer on your platform, it doesn't matter. You're still interacting with people on backend. You're still interacting with people on web. You are still interacting with the company at large when it comes to technical decisions. So in all cases, unless you are a solitary engineer, oh wait, that's never the case because you're also working with management. You do not work by yourself. So unless you can disseminate that knowledge and share it and work collaboratively, it is meaningless. And if you cannot explain it, you cannot lead it. Largely because coding inherently is built on trust. You have to trust one another to complete things, right? We see PRs, we build systems in place so that we keep to certain capabilities, but inherently building projects is built on trust. And if you cannot be understood, you cannot be considered trustworthy. Written skills are as important as verbal skills. How many people have worked at a place where they go, there's no documentation how any of this works. I don't even know what to send to this API or what I get back or what types they might be. Am I just supposed to bang on this until I can figure it out? That doesn't make a lot of sense. So written skills are pretty important. But also, if they aren't necessarily there, the verbal skills to actually go and ask and actually to write things down, because you need to have some kind of documentation, whether it be technical or actually something for a different audience, like slide decks. Slide decks are huge. The higher up you go, the more you write slide decks. And that's a really important thing because you have to take sentences and paragraphs of information and disseminate them down to maybe 5 words. How do 5 words encapsulate a paragraph of information? That's actually quite hard. Architecture. architecture is huge. Even just to say I have this here and I have this here and they connect in this way, and that works with our design pattern because of X. That actually informs others and makes it easier to figure things out. Diagrams. You may not think of diagrams as written skills, but Miro boards and all of those other kinds of tools really help visual learners understand what's going on without necessarily having to read into it, even though you may not know that that's a written skill. Another hard truth. Everyone wants a unicorn. Unicorns are freaking awesome. So why do I say everyone wants a unicorn? Because everyone wants someone who is technically capable of the job. So by that, they mean like meets or exceeds the knowledge required in order to actually do it. They can learn effectively, and that they have communication skills that go from within your team, so you can create good personal relationships and work within your organization, but that you can also work with outside engineering organizations and effectively collaborate, that you can teach and mentor both your peers and to those who are above you without necessarily having an ego, that you can effectively present, which means that you can make the slide deck, you have the written skills, and then you can also take the verbal skills to make that a concise presentation. The written skills to make sure that everyone's on, quote unquote, the same page. And that you can tailor that content to different audiences. I think one of the most amazing things that I've learned over the years is how to take the same slide deck and be able to present it to VPs and to SEs. And really just be able to tailor the content, either verbally or maybe moving a couple slides around to make sure that I'm respectful of their knowledge and time, and I'm giving everyone the kind of depth that they expect. And lastly, teamwork. That you can work collaboratively and accomplish a goal. This one's a little bit scary. What you think is happening actually has a bit of a kernel of truth. Personally, this is something I struggle with all the time because I am so worried that I'm not meeting expectations. And some of that is true sometimes, and oftentimes it's not. But the reason behind it has everything to do with my own perception, which is why your feelings are always valid. Whether or not they are something that other people perceive or that other people connect with is a totally different thing. But your feelings are always valid. Because guess what? You are more aware of yourself than anyone else is or would be. And kind of another point to this is we are more attuned socially and as humans to negative, nonverbal social cues than we are to positive ones. Part of this is cultural, and part of this is also just evolutionary. And the last thing here is that we learn through experience, which inherently creates insecurities too. Times where we've failed, we haven't necessarily received the feedback that we expected, or there was a misalignment, maybe not for any fault of your own. So what you think is happening generally has a kernel of truth. It's always valid for you, but is it always necessarily valid for everyone else? That's something you actually have to ask yourself. And where is it coming from? This one seems a little bit obvious. People only know what you tell them. Mind blowing, right? You have to evangelize your own work. This one's tough. It's because you think to yourself, well, obviously they see the PRs, they see the tickets that are getting moved, they see the assignments, they XYZ, right? But a lot of times your manager is not tracking individually every single thing that you do. So they may not actually be able to understand everything you've accomplished. So you have to communicate those accomplishments. You have to personally say, hey, these are the things that I've done. And even if it's part of just what was expected of you, sometimes just actually fulfilling on expectations is like an accomplishment in and of itself. And that means internally, what have you done for the team? What have you done for the product? But also externally, what work are you doing outside of just your platform? Who are you talking to? What are some initiatives that you're on? Are you doing some communication work around a particular problem set that, are you working with recruiting? Any of those kinds of things. You need to communicate those accomplishments and that work, if nothing else, but just to inform others and potentially get buy-in on future tasks. You have to communicate your learnings. You, as I cited earlier, unless you can actually start to share that information that you have, it's meaningless. And your work absolutely comes with difficulties. And you have to communicate those things that you've learned. In order to communicate effectively, you need to be open, especially when you're doing solutions, maybe even for the first time. Somebody else might have more experience in that, regardless of if they've been programming for, 30 minutes or 3 years. Not everything that we actually put together has to do with specifically just technical skills and asking around technical requirements. Sometimes it's really just figuring out what those requirements truly are. So be open to sharing your failings, your questions, your just, what am I doing right now? And those ideas and those concerns that you have can be reflected on others. Lastly, I want you to communicate your life. You don't have to tell people about everything that you're doing. I certainly don't want to see a tweet about you just went to the restroom. But you need to actually let people know when you're having issues, when maybe you have some sort of medical thing that you're going through, or a family member that's having particular difficulty, especially because it may not affect your hours, but sometimes it affects your mentality. And being a little bit sensitive to these things, or even just to find maybe some support from somebody else who's gone through something similar. Just be open about it, because then that way we can align and make sure that you're not overloaded, or that, we can account for, hey, maybe I want to give you the second priority thing just because I know that you're a little bit busy in your brain for the next couple of weeks. I want you to also say personal milestones. Did you accomplish something that you didn't know that you could do? Did you run a mile for the first time in several years? Or are you doing some work with like an external external community around community service? Or did, somebody in your family, are you expecting a kid? Again, do that in kind of a, maybe not the minute you find out, but share that with people, because positivity can actually be reflected. And more importantly, I want you to communicate your life in order to achieve balance. We don't want anybody working too hard. We also we also don't want to miss deadlines. So by communicating what you're actually up to in your own life, we're able to better help each other achieve balance and work collaboratively as a team, as a division, and as a company. Ooh. Your career progress is limited by your soft skills. Yikes. What do I mean by that? Well, first off, a senior position means that you can teach and mentor others. So everything that is past a regular software engineer has soft skills. And the higher you go, the more soft skills that you need. And that first step, the thing that makes somebody senior versus somebody who's just a software engineer, is not always necessarily the technical skills. It's a good part of this is the soft skills. Can you teach and mentor others? A lead means that you can then organize people around a project and actually work collaboratively or bring people into the fold, while also still meeting the requirements of a senior, which is that you can teach and mentor others. The next step up, a staff or principal, means that you can lead and organize teams, not just individuals, around projects, oftentimes with scope beyond your particular domain. That means that internally, that you're organizing your leads and that you are initializing all these projects, but it also means that you are the voice for your organization or teams in working with other sections within the company, especially around certain problems or architecture or best practices, more company-wide initiatives, that you're a part of that. And kind of the highest up here, an architect. It means that you can collaborate teams, leaders, divisions, and tech stacks together to solve problems. You are the organizer of kind of everyone together around certain projects or certain initiatives. You're not just working around it, you are leading it, or you have enabled leadership. You are the collaborator. The higher up you go, the more meetings you have that depend on these interpersonal skills. So yes, you absolutely will be prevented from going up another level, not because you are not technically capable of architecting things together. I expect a certain level of everyone being able to architect at a senior position. What I expect in these other ones, and what a lot of other people expect, especially because I asked a number of folks about what this actually means in their organizations, and especially with recruiters, is that you can start to take things together and bring people together around ideas. Unfortunately enough, office politics matter. How you and your work is perceived by the majority is more valid than the truth. This is unfortunate, but again, like I highlighted, how many people are actually, other than your immediate teammates, actually going through your PRs, looking at the work that you're doing, reading your documentation, looking at those tickets? It's a limited scope of people. And if there is, one or two above that is saying things, or, your perception actually matters. And it's actually more valid in the eyes of others than perhaps you want it to be. And unfortunately enough, that means that you have to play a little bit of office politics. Too much or not enough will establish your role and your path, which actually can either help you in progression or actually make it bad. So I want you to just be aware and cognizant a little bit of your perception, and kind of to that degree, incite feedback. Why? Because it's hard, especially when it's not positive. Oh, sorry. This just went into weird. Okay, sorry. And lastly, I want you to think about the Kobayashi Maru. This is a Star Trek reference, but unfortunately enough, a lot of times when it comes to office politics, it's an unwinnable situation. And it shouldn't necessarily be about winning, but it's about making the best choices that align a lot of times to actually accomplish the best solution that's possible. Lastly, we're going to finish off these with a few situations. And I want you to kind of get into all your feels. I talked a little bit about the Myers-Briggs a little bit earlier and DISC. So think about yourself. Are you an introvert or an extrovert? Because guess what? Introverts and extroverts both have struggles. And sometimes externally, they show up the same. Particularly one for me is speaking out of turn and, quote, reading the room. What does this actually look like? When somebody is like, oh, I'm about to say something and then I stop myself. It looks the same if you're an introvert or an extrovert, but the reasons behind it are different. We're going to go into kind of like a major reason of why it's happening. And then what we can do as individuals to kind of get ourselves out of there and to start working through a lot of these problems. And I'm going to start by saying like introverts and then extroverts, and really just think about what you actually identify as in these kinds of situations. Because a lot of us actually fall into some part of the scale of an ambivert. It just depends on the situation. So what we can try and do is actually normalize a number of these things. Firstly, let's talk about introverts. Oh my gosh, what is happening when you feel like you're speaking out of turn and that you're having trouble reading the room? It's because you're always assessing. You're always looking around, trying to figure things out while also doing so in your own head. It ends up being perhaps too much of a cognitive load. And this is actually something that some studies have actually found while tracking brain activity in groups of people who identify as introverts. And what that ends up looking like is that you are unsure when it is, quote, your turn to speak, especially in a situation where, for the most part, we are not doing roundtables of this person, this person, this person, this person, this person, and then everyone gets their opinion in. We work in groups where we're all talking at the same time in a lot of cases. And so that can make it really difficult to figure out when it is appropriate and, quote, when your turn is ready, because it may not actually happen. An introvert tends, in a lot of cases, to form their opinion clearly and concisely before they attempt to speak. And with all that cognitive load of reading other people and trying to figure out when you can actually speak, the problem occurs at the end, which is, unfortunately, you've waited and formed and you've put everything together so perfectly that you've actually missed your opportunity and the conversation has moved on. So what can we do to actually work through it? I want you, especially as somebody who identifies as an introvert, to rely specifically on your data and experience. I want you to think about your relationships. Who do you actually have a relationship with on an individual level? Who do you understand? Maybe that's actually the person that you should be looking to, or that might understand you best to help in that situation. So look to certain people. Don't look to everyone. because that can just be too much sometimes. I want you to find positive cues. Instead of looking at, each person individually trying to read them, glance. Find the positive cue that says maybe it's time to bring something else up. And positive cues could actually be somebody who's the stakeholder who's having a little bit of a negative. All right, let's look at this from the extrovert side, particularly what's happening. You have a tendency to jump in too soon, especially by people who identify on the opposite end of the spectrum. And what actually is causing this? Your eagerness, in a lot of cases, clouds your judgment. This is something I struggle with all the time, because in this next point, sometimes getting an opinion, at least in your mindset, can be more valuable than how well formed the opinion is. Have you actually thought through everything or created enough moments for you to actually get the information before you start spouting something? And unfortunately enough, what ends up happening is you have a tendency to speak for others, especially if you're used to being that kind of leadership role. And how do you work through it? You work through it by creating room. You have to resist the urge, at least the initial impulse. Right? We want you to first form opinions and save them. So something that I particularly do is I actually will use my fingers either on a surface or against my thumb. And I look for how many points I have on the topic at hand and kind of let that person speak until they get to a reasonable point. I try not to interrupt people. This is another thing that happens where you have a tendency through eagerness. And I'll take 2, maybe 3. If I start to see 4, I've instantly made a fist, and that means that there's too much. I have to divide it out, or that it might actually be something that I need to talk to somebody later about. Again, 2, ideal. 3, it's getting up there. But as soon as I've made a fist, it's already too much. I have too much to say. It's probably not the right time to actually bring it up. We've moved through too many topics. I want you to think about bringing value to the space by creating room. What are you going to actually do that's unique and actually going to create space for others? And especially with the points that you want to make. Do they actually end up becoming a little bit of leading questions or leading positions for other people who may not usually be as much into that kind of conversation, for them to actually bring in their expertise, especially if you know that they are more informed than you are, which is a good way to not speak for others, but create room for others. Collaborating. It can be a little crazy sometimes. I use some of these Schitt's Creek gifts because I actually just really enjoy that show. I feel it on so many levels. But collaborating as an introvert, what happens? You're not likely to speak first, unless by fear. And what do I mean by fear? You're not likely to actually say something unless you fear that you are actually going to be just completely blown away by the group that you're collaborating with. And you just really need to say something. And it's just this impulse and you're just going, ah. Or if you feel like you just need to assert to a certain degree what your position's going to be in this collaboration, and you have to let that be known first. And you're fearful that if you wait any time, it's not going to happen for you. But you also might not be likely to speak first because of fear. fear that whatever you're saying may not be the rightest way or as well formed as you want it to be. You see, a lot of these things actually run right into each other. Working through it. I want you to reduce the room. If we think about especially introverts and a lot of their relationships, the larger the group is, the harder it is. So I want you to think about working one-on-one, either with an individual or with an idea. Start that by setting an agenda, even if one isn't necessarily set for you. Set an agenda of what it is that you actually want to accomplish or what others might want to accomplish, or at least participate in it, to make sure that what you're doing is working one-on-one with either the topic or an individual. Keep breaking it down until it actually puts you into a comfort zone where you're, instead of looking for everyone around, maybe you're just talking to like a couple of people. And part of that is establishing goals. If you can establish certain goals that you have, you can really reduce the room, reduce the scope, and take a lot of the fear out of collaborating. To that degree, I want you to align the stakeholders in your context. So around those goals, around those agenda items, just think about who are the major stakeholders and what are the inputs that you really have for those situations, or maybe that you don't necessarily have at all. Really think about context and stakeholders as you're actually going through things. Collaborating as an extrovert. What's happening? Oh gosh, I am so bad about this. And it's interesting because professionally, I'm an extrovert, but in my real life, in a lot of ways, I'm an introvert. I am such a homebody. It's almost ridiculous. This whole, past year of pandemic, I was like, oh, I just get to stay home. That's great. I don't need to see people. But as far as my work goes and why I kind of show up in a lot of tests is like on the verge as somebody who shows up as an ambivert is interesting because work-wise, I do this all the time. And it's kind of ridiculous. And I always feel guilty about it. And you know why I feel guilty about it? Because it's actually rooted a lot of times in my own insecurity. That fear, the same kind of fear that introverts are feeling, it is manifesting itself in a totally different way. Where they might not say something, I'm saying something because I have no other thing to fall back on in terms of how I'm going to handle the fear of the situation. In a lot of cases, I've already been overthinking everything. And so I just kind of want to spout it out with that same level of impetus and jumping in that we've elaborated on previously. Part of this also is a little bit of a fallacy where you might actually, as an extrovert, have an expectation to lead because maybe, there's a little less of them proportionally in the tech field. Working through it. I want you to ask. Before we talked about creating room, now I want you to kind of ask as part of that. I want you to neg your assertions and overthinking with the opinions of others. We talked about giving space. I want you to ask about what those things are that you have already been overthinking. And even if you are going to, come in and say something, I want it to be a question, not an assertion of your position or your knowledge. This one's patience. Allow others, through the questions that you've asked, to connect the pieces to all the things that you've already been kind of overthinking or running into, so that you can speak in context and with kind of that final sort of shape of what you've already been doing. And it's already done all the work in the conversation of setup for you, while making sure that everyone has an opportunity to get their piece in. And finally, the last section is inspire / getting buy-in. Somebody has to inspire these people, right? People might not realize that as an introvert, you can absolutely be inspiring and maybe rise to the occasion to get buy-in. If we look at a lot of our greatest tech leaders and people that we look up to, they are introverts. So how does that work? What's happening when you're trying to get buy-in from other people as an introvert? You really kind of have a lot of times where there's no idea where to start. You don't know who to talk to, what's involved. You really want to know the entire scope, that kind of formed micromanagey kind of opinion, even just within yourself. And it has an inherent difficulty for introverts just because it involves others with direct collaboration. There isn't that safe space of you work on this, I work on this, and this, and this, right? You have to actually get to that point where you've put everything together so that you can actually work individually. So there's inherent difficulty in that. What does that look like when we're working through it? Confidence comes with a plan. I want you to bullet point your points. This is something to do actually directly in context while you're in a meeting. I do this all the time with journals, but I want you to bullet point your points so that we're not trying to put together absolutely everything at once, but we really want to hone in on a few key results so that we're still active in the conversation, or that we kind of can be more reactive to what questions were actually being asked or points that are being given. I want you to build in roles, not names. What are the things that need to get accomplished? We need somebody or some group to take over this. Don't say, I need X person in order to do this. That isn't going to help you with buy-in if you're constantly throwing to the same person every time for a certain kind of work. It can make it cliquish, even though that may not be your intention. Entice the help and expertise that you need. It might just be in asking questions and say, hey, who would be best for this? And approaching that on an individual level before or even during, to really kind of build out to collaboratively what this looks like. And by reducing the room like we did earlier, down to individuals or individual questions. I want you to take the time to understand the motivation of others and help understand what their individual or group value of what you're putting together is. Finally, extroverts. What does that look like getting buy-in for you? What's happening? Oh gosh, confidence before thought. A little bit of that jumping in kind of thing. Like, oh, my idea is so great. They're absolutely going to understand it. They're absolutely going to get it. And I can just XYZ. Understand that your vision may not be seen. That's kind of interesting. But you have to get their buy-in as part of the inspiration, not just talk about it, but work with someone. So understand that what you're saying may not be understood, especially when you're just kind of blurping out about it. You've instantly put expectations on others. They are absolutely going to follow you because you know what you're doing and you have the confidence in order to execute on it. But that can be really unfair. And part of those expectations can come with telling people what they're doing rather than getting volunteers, even if it falls under what their job responsibilities are. Nobody really likes being told that they're going to be doing something. They like actually feeling like they're participating in something else. Working through it. I want you to live in the real world. Oof. Not like MTV Real World from like, the early 2000s, late 90s, but I want you to be vulnerable. Understand that your vision might have gaps or areas where other people can actually provide value and input. Acknowledge what you don't know. You don't know everything. That is why you need to inspire others. You need to get buy-in because it's not just you who's going to do the work. And to that respect, leadership in inspiration and getting buy-in does not mean that you are going to be the leader of whatever this thing is. Leadership does not mean that you are the leader. Having leadership is just about exuding it. And where does this all kind of finally come together? Great leaders are not defined by the absence of weakness, but rather by the presence of clear strength. This is by John Peter Zenger in New York City in around the 1730s. So this has been true for hundreds of years. You are not trying to create something that hasn't been done before. You just need to realize that this is about not having no weaknesses, but rather exuding your clear strengths and taking moments to be inclusive. And if you haven't realized it by now, this is actually a talk on leadership. This isn't a talk on just pure soft skills. This is a talk about how do you actually take these things that you need in order to progress or to even do your job effectively. Because you are a leader at every level, or you need to become a leader at every level in order to just get the kind of job satisfaction that you want. And with that, finally, here's the slides, here's the survey, some other information about myself. And I do want to say, if you are willing to do the survey, I am going to give the first 5 people a swag pack. So please follow through on that feedback. I love hearing about, what can be improved or what other things you want to learn. So thank you very much.
I so loved that talk. I can't tell you, and I'm so glad that what you did, I'm so glad you made it about leadership too. When you and I originally talked about this concept, it was all about the soft skills that are needed and whatnot. But I love that you took it sort of to that next level and actually interpreted to what that really means, and it is about leadership. Just so everyone knows, so the link is on here to the survey. The video should be posted on our platform shortly, so if anybody misses a chance right now to do it, they can catch it up if they miss the link later, and we'll put it in the chat. Stacy, I don't know if you noticed, but we do have a couple of questions here. We're running up against time because at 10 we've got to go to a different segment. But I'm going to pop off here, and if you could try to just kind of quickly take some of these questions, I think there's a lot of interest in these. All right, I'm going to pop off and let you go at it.
All right, so I guess the most popular one is, with more companies going remote, it can be hard to make connections and get your work noticed. How is more remote work impacting how we develop and use soft skills? So this is actually really interesting. I've been a remote worker since before it was cool or before it was normal. I had 2.5 years with a previous employer, and I am about 2/3 of a year or over half a year now into my current one. And how do you get this noticed is really just by being participative and making sure that you have leadership that actually is participative, and also to just have TBs with your leadership, at least on an every 2-week basis, and with your coworkers. I swear, some weeks, half my meetings are touch bases, and it can be incredibly valuable because I can share the things that I'm working on without judgment, and so that they have context. More than anything, you want to be a great informer. So how do you do that? It's actually by just participating, posting on Slack when you have a problem, or to, bring things up on a TB. Actually, just not to have the fear to say, hey, do you have a minute? Or actually, I see that you have a little moment in your calendar on like at 2:00. Do you mind if I pop in like 15 minutes? I have a couple questions and I could really use your help. Even if you already think that you kind of know things, but somebody else is also working on stuff, you need to work collaboratively. And sometimes, just like what I had this past week, I spent 4 or 5 hours just on a phone call or on a, video chat with someone, just working through a number of problems and really kind of helping them, but also working on the code stuff that we needed to get done. And it was great. It's how you actually get to know people. It's how you actually get to evangelize. What are the thoughts in your head? What's the thoughts in their head? How do you connect the dots? Okay, so the next one is, thank you for taking the time to discuss cognitive skills. Can you please share some of your strategies to screen candidates for the soft skills you mentioned? This is actually about the way that you put your entire recruiting effort together. Specifically, your actual recruiting should reflect the actual values. If the table stakes are that they're technically capable of the work, then you should actually make that the first thing that they go through. So maybe the first discussions and take-home exam, or, I prefer the take-home exam because I think it's a lot more accurate in terms of what their quality of work looks like, or that they provide a code example that they are, willing to share. It doesn't have to be perfect, but I just kind of want to see that they know what they're doing and where their kind of skill levels are. And then you have maybe like one mixture of some technical questions and some personal questions by folks who are more in the tech side. And you actually create those kind of opportunities. You want to be respectful of people's time at the same point, but really 2/3 of your criteria and the way that you do judgment on your candidates should be around their soft skills. Were they not just able to tell you what XYZ was, but were they able to elaborate into how it's actually used in context? Were they able to give examples, or even just discuss kind of a little further into why? Because that's really that kind of like learn, disseminate, mentor kind of skill set. And the next one, I've been working in professional Android development for 3 years, and I think I am a good communicator. But how do I actually know if you're a good communicator? How do I measure this? Quite frankly, it's through feedback, and having regularly scheduled feedback by actually having touch bases with your managers, with your coworkers, and saying, hey, did I do a good job of actually communicating some of this stuff? Or actually, what are some other areas that you would like to know about? That's really hard sometimes. And specifically, you have to actually ask for the negative part of that feedback, which is really, where can I improve? If you actually frame it in a positive sense, you're much more likely to get back the kind of results that are more helpful in actually your next step. Okay, I'm gonna just kind of run through this next one, which is, what are some of the nonverbal cues that you have encountered while interviewing a candidate or collaborating with a teammate that you feel negatively impacted your review on them? Really, it was not looking anywhere towards the screen where we were supposed to be actually communicating through. And where their body language just went to, because I could tell that they weren't, it was really hard, because maybe it's just the day, And sometimes what can happen is you need to disseminate, are they feeling that way because of their current employment and just trying to get out? Trying. And how do you then ask them the appropriate questions that get them actually excited, or really just to change their mood? More than anything, I want your recruiting process to be reflective of your values in how you actually look for your next people. And that means that you actually kind of take that step forward in positivity. And if nothing else, be respectful of their time. And even if it doesn't work out, that they felt like it was worth it, that they got something out of it, that they either learned something, or maybe they didn't feel exhausted by that 1 hour. I dread sometimes when I've had interviews and I just know I am going to get beat down for an hour and I'm going to need 2 hours afterward to recover. Don't be that way in your actual recruiting, and you will get a much more honest feel for who someone is and where they are. Now, I do want to be respectful of time. I know we have a couple of more questions. Please hit me up on Twitter. My DMs are open. And also on the survey, I will try my best to actually get back to everyone individually. And thank you again, everyone.